We're going to call the 7 o'clock Iredell County Commissioners meeting to order. Call on Mr. Johnson for the invocation.
Let's pray, please. Heavenly Father, we come to you again. We're in desperate need of your wisdom and your grace, and we thank you for this opportunity to serve you and people of this county. We pray tonight that you will give us a mind of sound judgment, that you will give us a heart for the uninfected by a selfish motivation, but a heart of service. Pattern after your Son, the Lord Jesus, for we ask it in his name. Amen.
Amen. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Messenger, do you have any adjustments to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I do have two adjustments to the agenda this evening under item J, or memo number 12. Would like to add an item to that. The first part of that will be a request for approval of budget amendment number 53 for adjustments to the FY10 Troutman library budget, and then would like to add and also to authorize the department to apply for a computer grant. That would be, again, item J, memo number 12, and adding authorization for the staff to apply for a computer grant. Then, in addition to that, we do have one other item to add, and this will become item M. Item M, and this is a request to approve a design for the Providencia rail spur. Again, item M, to approve to begin the design, not to approve the design, but to begin the design for the Providencia rail spur, and Lynn Niblock will handle that item. Under closed session, personnel can be deleted from the closed session this evening, so the only thing we'll have under closed session will be for economic development, and those are the adjustments I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Messenger. Go ahead.
if I may, during the closed session, may we also add a question for counsel?
Okay, that will be attorney-client, and that would be GS 143-318-11A3.
Okay, any additional?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Appointments before the board. Mr. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Warren, members of the commission.
Mr. Warren, can I, would you turn the mic, please?
Okay. Hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm a member of the Iredell County Total Census Count Committee, and we've been involved in promoting the census to Iredell County residents over the past 6 or 8 months. And it's already March, and in a few weeks, the census survey will be mailed out to our residents. So in addition to trying to get a good count, we're trying to make sure that as many federal dollars that go out of Iredell County are returned, because a lot of the grant monies and the allocations from the federal government are based on population. And in 2000, our percentage of return rate was, I think, in the 60 percentile. 60 to 65, and we're hoping to do much better this time. And I thought it would be an appropriate time, just a few weeks before the surveys arrive in the mail, for us to invite a census official here to speak before the Board of Commissioners. So I have with me tonight Ed Burleson. He's the manager of the Hickory Census Bureau, which includes Iredell County and the 6-county region. And I'll turn it over to Ed at this point.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners, and Clerk of the Board, and Joel, whom I've met. I have to say I appreciate seeing census cups on 5 out of the 6 locations there. That's pleasing to see. The Constitution requires that the government conduct a census, a population count every 10 years. The importance of the census, as Steve was mentioning, is the main one is the allocation of over $400 billion per year through government grants throughout the United States, $4 trillion in 10 years. Some of the things it affects, of course, is the apportionment of the number of seats in the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives. It in the most equitable fashion, distributes this $400 billion down to local communities based on the population. We're the numbers people. Our goal is to count every inhabitant in the United States. The Hickory office is responsible for 7 counties, Iredell included. What I would really like to talk about is not only the benefits that will come in 2011 from the dollars that are federally funded, but also the current and more immediate economic stimulus package of employment opportunities, especially in Iredell County. I have literature on the table outside the room here for anyone to take with them. The one message that I would like everyone to understand is it is your right to stand up and be counted. It is important to be counted. As Steve was mentioning, actually in 2000, nationwide, we had a 67% return rate on the questionnaires. Those questionnaires will go out in approximately 2 weeks. When the people, the residents, receive these, they will have adequate time to, at their leisure, fill out this very simple questionnaire. It's a 1 sheet of paper, 10 simple questions, approximately 10 minutes of time for each person in the residence. For those that mail those back, that will create our workload for the next operation, which will be to go out and visit every residence that did not return the questionnaire. So in 2000, it was 67% nationwide. In North Carolina, it was 64%. Nationwide, if we can increase the response rate of the questionnaires by 1%, for every 1%, we will save $80+ million. That money, again, will add to the $400 billion that's distributed. What I would like to do, according to the time, I can take some questions now. If there's any specific questions, I will stay until the end and be available outside for any questions from the audience or from the commissioners or you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you. Questions from any of the board members? Mr. Burleson?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
All right. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could do one thing. Mr. Warren, before you leave, I want to apologize to you. I was making a note over here, and you blew through a comment there. The 60 to 65% that you were talking about, what was that in relation to? Are you saying we get back about 65 cents?
The response rate on the survey, I think in 2000 was 64% in Iredell County, and we're hoping with this new effort for the 2010 census to improve on that. I think one way to look at it, and I've seen some statistics on this, and Ed can probably back me up on this, is that for every household that does not respond to the survey, that's basically costing $1,000 to their community.
Correct. For Iredell County.
And so it's very important that we reach some of these hard-to-reach areas and neighborhoods, and the census has been very good about identifying census tracts and neighborhoods and certain groups that have been very poor in responding to the survey, and in trying to get in touch with some leaders in that particular neighborhood or group. And to just use an example, we have a lot more Hispanic residents than we have in the past, and we've been able to try to reach out through the Hispanic officials that we have here in Statesville and Iredell County. We've got a Hispanic heritage Statesville police officer, for example, that's been very involved in our total count census committee. And that's just an example, but we're trying to do as much as we can to improve the count results for Iredell, because we're cognizant of the fact, as Ed said, that we want to get as much federal dollars returned to Iredell County as we possibly can.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I apologize that I...
Mr. Chairman, also Mr. Burleson mentioned earlier, but he didn't say it in here, about the need to recruit enumerators. Do you want to address that for just a moment?
I'm glad to do that. I wasn't really aware of what kind of time I had. One thing to clarify, actually in 2000, it was the North Carolina return rate of being 64%, 64 point some. Nationwide, it was 67 point some. So what the most important thing is we need them to fill out the questionnaires when they receive them. If they do not, our operations are tailored to then go out and count every resident. So the big important message is to get out to take home to your family and your friends, your constituents, your employees, anyone and everyone you see, is stand up and be counted. Because the more accurate 100% population count means more dollars flowing to Iredell County and down through the communities of Iredell, of every single one. On the employment opportunities, we currently have multiple locations within Iredell County that we staff on a daily basis to do testing. Probably the best for anyone that's interested, there is a toll-free number. It's 866-861-2010. Anyone interested in employment can call that number. They will be put in a test site. They will take a very simple test of about 28 questions. They will be put into an applicant pool, and as the jobs come available, which they are coming available within a month or even shorter, they will be picked by the computer, by their test scores. They will be trained, and they'll be paid for the training. The bulk of the positions available are going to be for enumerators, for census takers. That position pays $11.50 an hour. It also pays a mileage for their travel time. It is paid training, full wage during their training. It's 4.5 days of training they're paid for. And they are thoroughly trained on the correct procedures in knocking on doors, taking the census. But the key is to get the dollars flowing to Iredell, the ones they deserve, is 100% count of all the inhabitants. And that's what we plan on doing. Anything else?
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Smith, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. I don't really have much to say. I'm going to turn this presentation over to Bjorn Hansen, who is a representative from Centralina Council of Governments. And after Bjorn has completed his presentation, I have had 3 gentlemen that do wish to speak to add comments to the presentation made by Bjorn. So, therefore, I'm keeping my comments brief, and I'll turn it over to Bjorn.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me present to you today. I'm coming to you tonight to present the Lake Norman Regional Bicycle Plan, which was initiated about a year and 2 months ago at the request of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. They came to Centralina in 2008 and asked us at the request of the legislature, who directed them to develop a regional bicycle route, and by regional I mean multi-county, somewhere in the state, and they had to identify it. And they wanted it to go off-road as much as possible. So they looked throughout the state, and because of the history of this area being able to work cooperatively, as well as the fact that the Carolina Thread Trail was being initiated at the time, they chose the Lake Norman area to develop a route, and they asked Centralina Council of Governments to develop it for them. And I'm a transportation planner there. And when we say off-road, we're talking about either multi-purpose paths or, in the instance of the Lake Norman State Park, it may just be mountain biking paths where there's a parallel road that you could use as well. They want this to be for both residents and for tourism. They wanted Lake Norman ultimately in the future to be thought of like people think of Hilton Head Island or the Outer Banks, that you go there, and when you go there for vacation, you bring your bicycles with you. And they understood that it's going to take a long time to implement this route, and so they recommended that an enduring organization, a task force, be identified to help coordinate and advocate implementation of this route as it takes place over time and over the multiple jurisdictions that it encompasses. The study area is pretty complicated. 4 counties. Oops, what I wanted to do. There we go. Study area, 4 counties. Southeastern Iredell County chops Mooresville in half, roughly, as well as a portion of Mecklenburg and eastern Lincoln County. It's fairly complicated, not only because of the municipalities and the counties, but also because of transportation planning. Iredell County is a member of the Lake Norman RPO, as is Lincoln County. Mecklenburg County and its municipalities are a member of an MPO, and then Catawba County, the rural portion, is a member of a separate rural planning organization. And then the NCDOT is divided up into divisions. This area is divided up into 2, so it's pretty complicated. But at the end of the day, we focused on the fact that there's one lake that ties it all together. Now, you may have heard of a previous initiative for a bicycle plan around the lake. That was about 5 years ago. It was done to satisfy the intent of former Board of Transportation member from Iredell County, Mr. Frank Johnson. A sketch plan was done by Centralina in 2006, 2007, but it was not endorsed by the NCDOT because they had no regional bicycle plan process. They had no standards. So they intend that when this plan is done, they can replicate the process elsewhere in the state as well as take the recommendations. Now, Iredell County was well represented by both county staff and municipal staff, Lake Norman RPO, Lake Norman State Park, Duke Energy, quite a few bicycle advocates, and then Division 12 staff who met monthly in Mooresville. And the key terminology that you need to keep in mind when you talk about the mission and the vision for this plan is that it's both transportation and recreation, and this was identified up front. And what that does is it gives greater flexibility for local communities as they may apply for grants. It allows them to apply for both recreation and transportation grants, which a lot of times in the past you can use one or the other, but not both. And in terms of who's the design bicyclist who we're planning this for, it's not necessarily for Lance Armstrong, and it's not for children. It's just to have their training wheels taken off. We expect that the bicyclists are skilled and understand what it means to ride on a road with vehicles. I'm going to, in the interest of time, move up to the route evaluation and the route itself. It's pretty complicated to get around the lake. The lake is only 50 years old, and it made a lot of peninsulas and cut off a lot of roads. We tried to prioritize these for each of the 4 counties to help identify which projects should be done first, as well as what the recommended improvements are for each of them. Now, the recommended route, you have 2 different lines here. You have this initial route, which is the thick yellow line, and then you have the thinner orange line, which is called the ultimate route. And in some instances, the initial and the ultimate are one and the same, like Brawley School going out from Mooresville. But in other instances, you need future improvements to take advantage of the ultimate route, such as Perth to Dooley over to Morrison Plantation or Williamson Road. So and then looking at particularly Mecklenburg County and Lincoln counties, they were able to take advantage of their Carolina Thread Trail processes, which they've completed. So you've identified future greenways in Cornelius and in East Lincoln County that, if implemented, the route can take advantage of as a part of this overall route. The initial route recommends what's available, what's possible in the short term. It also reflects local input. Lincoln County requested that their portion be included in the ultimate route, but not in the initial route, so we amended that, pulled the route back to 150 in Catawba County, and then back to County Park off of Stamford NC 73. But Iredell County remains the same. In terms of prioritization, it doesn't say that the lowest projects are bad. It just means that they're either very expensive to do or they require other improvements in order to make them useful. Like NC 150, there's Kaiser Island Road, which is a fine road to bicycle on, but it's no good until you improve NC 150 to get to it. In Iredell County, you have quite a few high priority segments through downtown Troutman, to the state park, Brawley School, 150. And a lot of these sections, they scored highly because either all they need is signage or because they have a lot of benefits. They connect a lot of users, there's a lot of attractions in the area, and they offer a wide range of benefits. So these low-end projects are ones that you're primarily waiting until the road gets improved. That would be projects like I said before, 150 and NC 73, because they're not within the scope of authority they have, but the resources, either Mecklenburg or Lincoln or Catawba or Iredell counties to improve those roads. Now, looking specifically in Iredell County, there are 3 signature routes. These signature routes are what's going to be identified in more detail in the brochure that goes along with this plan, and 3 high priority projects. One is 115 going from the Mecklenburg County line up to downtown to Morrisville. Another is in downtown Troutman up to Old Mountain Road, and then the third is in Morrisville, going by the golf course, connecting out to where Brawley School is getting improved. These projects actually, this one, Morrisville, has identified funding through CMAQ dollars that are available through the NCDOT, so this one's already funded. Unfortunately, the money's not going to be available for several years, but they've identified funding. And Troutman got 2 sections in the top 20 statewide for enhancement projects in the most recent NCDOT project ranking process. So the communities are applying for grants to implement this, as well as, obviously, NCDOT is including bicycle lanes in the widening of Brawley School Road, so they're implementing it on their behalf as well. And Iredell County is just starting the Carolina Thread Trail process, so when that process is done, there are some off-road segments that would be ideal to include in this long term. You can amend the route to include those recommendations. Now, the recommended improvements, you have a wide range. You go from just signage and leaving the road alone to bicycle lanes, which are 4 feet with a signed bicycle on the side of the road, or paved shoulders, which are wide outside lanes, which are typically 2 feet of asphalt, not signed, and then multi-purpose paths, which are your 10 feet paved off-road facilities. And you can see in Lincoln County a lot of the Carolina Thread Trail, existing greenway that's proposed, or existing that exists by Birkdale Village, and then the future one proposed east of US 21 in Cornelius. And then within Iredell County, you have bicycle lanes, paved shoulders, signage for quite a bit through Morrisville, either because the roads are in pretty good shape for bicyclists as they currently exist, or because bicycle lanes are getting implemented. And these recommendations are consistent with Morrisville, Troutman, and Iredell County comprehensive transportation plans, all of which have been created in the last 5 years. Now, to get around the whole lake, you're talking about over 60 miles, and there are very few bicyclists who want to do that. So we broke the route up into shorter 10 to 15 mile long segments that take advantage of the best safety along the route, have identified start and stop points, and there's something interesting along it, and these would be prominently featured in the brochure. And within Iredell County, you have downtown Morrisville, and you have the state park and downtown Troutman, all as key destinations. So you have a loop going from Troutman to the state park and back, a loop going out Brawley School Road and back, one from downtown Morrisville down into Mecklenburg County through Davidson, Cornelius, Birkdale, ending at a county park. And these routes are all intended to be identified and prioritized for installing signage. Now, how is this going to get implemented? Just because this plan, or when this plan gets approved, it doesn't mean that a new pot of money will be made available by the NCDOT, but it does mean that the recommended segments will be eligible for grants. They'll be considered when the DOT does improvements to the roads as a part of the design up front, as opposed to having to ask for it. It'll be automatically included. And the other strategies, Mooresville's done this quite a bit. Restriping roads where the roads are wider. They'll install bicycle lanes. Requiring as part of the development review process, you have frontage. Install the improvement along the frontage of the property. Providing inputs as a part to and providing comments to the traditional NCDOT project development process, and through the maintenance as well. If there's a road being resurfaced, that's the best time to get out there and try and put another couple feet of asphalt on the road. In terms of when we're done, in terms of completion, it's going to have segments looking like all three of these. In fact, I think all three of these pictures are from the area. You have roads where you just have maybe a little bit of a shoulder, but otherwise it's just bicycles on the road, off-road, and then bicycle lanes. People talk about it. There's a sustained commitment to implement it. People come from outside the area to ride on it and to spend money. And that it has connections between origins and destinations. People use it to complete trips, not just for recreation. So because they understand this is going to take a while to implement, there's a lot of communities and organizations involved. They identified a task force that would be an on-call organization that, no kidding, would have signatories for each of the communities that they could make recommendations. If the DOT said, hey, we need to look at the route, we want to make we recommend making a change, this task force could speak for all the affected communities to say, yes, we think that's a good recommendation, a good change, or no, we don't think that should be made, and they speak for the area. There'd be no cost to the local governments. It'd be administered by Centralina COG as a part of member services. Multi-jurisdictional initiatives like this is what we do all the time, and we don't expect that it would meet very regularly. It would be pretty much on an as-needed basis. So we presented to the Iredell County Planning Board earlier this year, and we're presenting tonight, actually March 2nd, that's a typo in there, apologize, but presenting to you tonight, not for adoption of the plan, because adoption is actually by the NCDOT Board of Transportation, but the DOT did ask that this plan get presented to each of the affected communities along the route to consider endorsement of the plan and participating in the task force. And then after tonight, we have two more presentations. We have to go to Huntersville and then Mecklenburg County, and then we'll be presenting to the Board of Transportation after that. So I thank you for your time, and I'll try and answer any questions that you have.
Any questions?
Mr. Hansen, as far as the other governing bodies that have considered this, what's been their response?
Let me go back to the overall map.
Got Catawba, Lincoln, Iredell, and Mecklenburg.
Yes, sir. It's been approved or endorsed already by Catawba, Troutman, Mooresville, Davidson, Cornelius. Huntersville goes to their presentation on March 15th, and the board and their Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners goes on the 16th. Lincoln County endorsed as well. They did amend it. They're the only body that did amend it. They approved the route, as you see right here, and requested that it be put on the ultimate route and not signed initially. And they also took off the section that was closer to the lake that they had concerns over putting extra bicyclists on low-volume roads. So those are the groups. So we've presented to everyone's planning board. Everyone, with the exception of Iredell County, Mecklenburg County, Huntersville, have approved or endorsed it to date.
Any additional questions?
Yes, this would be better for Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, the planning board had a 5-5 vote. Evidently, somebody had some heartburn with this.
Yes, they did.
What was the problem?
There were. It's hard to kind of sum it up in one question. There were a lot of questions about it. There were questions about the liability, big concern, the liability of if someone is riding their bike on a paved shoulder for instance, and they have an accident, who's liable? Does that put the county in any danger? Which I think the answer there is there's really no difference than if it were happening now. This would probably make it safer than if you didn't have the shoulders. There were many questions about the cost, and if by endorsing something like this, these improvements that would generally, in most cases other than the signage, be done as resurfacing takes place, would that potentially push other projects back on our list? And I think in speaking with Bjorn and looking at the structure that we've gone through in the past, I don't think that that would be the case either. But there were quite a few questions about that because of some of the roads that have taken so long to be improved in this county over the last 10, 15 years. But those were two of the big ones. There was quite a bit of discussion on the plan overall.
I'll be honest with you, that's one concern I have. It's difficult to explain to someone sitting in traffic on the way to work that transportation money's been diverted because we built a bike trail. I'm not against bikers, but here's a question a little bit more in your area of expertise. On page 15, Mr. Hansen talked about requiring as a part of the development review process. Would you incorporate that into some roadway protection overlay plan? And if it would it require additional setbacks by some developer or property owner?
Possibly. What I would anticipate, and I don't think it's as big of an issue in Iredell County as it would be in some of the municipalities, but if a developer were undertaking a road improvement, for instance, which we don't generally require, we require just the preservation of the right-of-way. But if a developer was improving a road, adding another lane or a turning lane, one of those as an example, if it fell along this route and we put it into an ordinance to require it, then we would ask that there be an additional 2 for whatever the prescribed distance or width is for the extra lane. So there's some possible impact on the development community, but I think it's really more going to be focused in the towns than it would be in Iredell County through our development process.
I just don't think that, well, I've worked with you long enough. You know how I feel about requiring somebody to do something and then they don't get compensated for the use of their property. I'm just not going to get into a constitutional discussion here, but I think that's dangerous.
Well, and along those same lines, as with any plan that we hear, if it is endorsed, we always come back to you to put the rubber on the road, so to speak, and put those regulations in place, and then you'd have an opportunity to give us your input as it goes into an ordinance, which is really where the meat of this would be.
Well, if that becomes the case, I'm on the front end. I've worked with you a number of years, and I have a lot of confidence in you. Why don't you do everything within your power to minimize that impact on the property owners?
I will.
Somebody's going to surrender the use of, I don't care if it's 6 inches of their property, then they either need to be compensated for it or get some use out of it if at all possible. All I have.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
Mr. Norman, I did have 3 gentlemen that had approached me early in the day as we discussed, and if you still have time.
Very brief.
Very brief. Their names are Steve Doolittle, Jeff Archer, and Cameron Frazier. Jeff Archer was actually on the committee that helped with this study.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for just a moment here. I'm here in 2 capacities. One is a small business owner here in Iredell County. I own Cool Breeze Cyclery in Mooresville. And second, I'm the event director for the Lake Norman Excursion, which is the largest recreational cycling event in the region. As a small business owner, routinely every week we have families coming into a bike shop interested in quizzing on how to get their children out from in front of televisions, outdoors, addressing really, countering really the trends in childhood obesity. And the question is, where can we go as a family to ride our bikes? That is a very difficult, increasingly that is a more and more difficult question to give an answer to. A forward-looking plan like Bjorn has worked on here and laid out is one of the few things that I believe could have a direct impact in 10 years' time on the health and wellness of our children. As the event director for the Lake Norman excursion, in 3 short years, this event has again become the largest recreational cycling event. 800 people last July participated. We raised $30,000 for the Lake Norman chapter of the American Red Cross. And my comment here is that this is a very attractive region, actually. And in other states and cities like Tucson, a cycling event like this can grow to be 10,000 people, not 800 people. So the attractiveness of the Lake Norman region could attract major tourism dollars over time, again, with this type of plan. In the late 80s, a similar event circumnavigated Lake Norman. That's no longer a possibility. This forward-looking plan would again make that a possibility and again, I believe, bring tourism dollars to the region. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you again for taking your time to allow us to speak. My name is Jeff Archer. I'm a resident of Mooresville and also a small business owner here in Statesville. I guess my thing, and I'd like to make the point, is the cyclists are not horribly well organized. We don't have leagues or we don't have organizations or associations like soccer or baseball or lacrosse. And it's a very important activity because it can, like Mr. Johnson pointed out about traffic, you know, a bike takes up a lot less room than a car. And I think if the opportunities are given to people, they will use cycling to replace their car for a lot of small trips. I'd sent out an email to all the commissioners earlier yesterday that had some of those facts that I hope you had a chance to look at. I'd also like to just, one of the points I'd like to make is I was the Cub Master for our Cub Scout pack down in Mooresville, and one of the scouts that I had, Dylan, always went to his principal at Lake Norman Elementary, and every time he got out of the bus, he'd say, so the principal goes, "Where's my bike rack?" He did that for 6 months, and they finally installed a bicycle rack at Lake Norman Elementary. The next day, that thing was full to capacity. There was bikes leaned up against the building, and I think that would be the thing if you were to build this plan. I think the use is there. It just may not be something that's very obvious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm here more as a cycling enthusiast. My wife is a cycling enthusiast. I actually live in the town of Troutman, adjacent.
State your name, please.
My name is Cameron Frazier. Sorry. I live in the town of Troutman, actually adjacent to where this trail is proposed. Again, my wife and I are both cycling enthusiasts, and I have 3 daughters that I hope to raise to be cycling enthusiasts. Mr. Doolittle spoke of the health benefits. I certainly see that in the cyclists in the area, and hope to raise my children to have those same health benefits and to stay fit. In order to do that, we do have some difficulty in locations for them to safely ride. I see this as an opportunity to be able to expand the areas that they can ride safely, and we can do that as a family. As it is, we travel a lot to, an example is the Virginia Creeper Trail. We take the family up there, we spend the day. You'd be amazed at the amount of people that capitalize on that treasure that Virginia has, and there's actually businesses that have popped up along that trail that are just doing an outstanding job and getting a lot of business from the amount of traffic that goes through. I envision that some of this may have some of that same potential. Another thing is I like to commute via bicycle. I started commuting to work. I actually work at ASMO in Statesville. So I kind of travel through town here on my bike, and I'm hoping that this may be the foundation for potential expansion. We can see a success here and possibly expand that, because there are some areas when I'm traveling back and forth to work with my bike that it's a little difficult. But I like Jeff said, that there is a lot of people out there that I think would jump at the opportunity to have an asset like this in the area, and I definitely see that it would bring a lot of opportunities to the locals in the area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. Mr. Smith, do you have anything else?
I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the plan as is? Or what would you guys like to do?
Mr. Hansen, can I ask you a couple more questions, please, sir?
Yes, sir.
Is there a cost estimate on this project? Is there any revenue stream to support
The project,
financing of this
the
project?
overall route is broken into phases. I mean, there's about 50 of them total. It depends on what the recommended improvement is. For the sections that only require signage, the DOT is going to pay for signage and install it. For sections that require paved shoulders, as a standalone project, that can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per mile if you have to do shoulder improvements, if you have to purchase any right-of-way, as well as the construction of it. Multi-purpose path can be $1 million a mile, depending on whether you already have the easement through sewer or water, or whether you have to go out and purchase that land. So to give an overall cost estimate, it's futile to do that. I can say that that Mooresville was awarded about $2.25 million to install bicycle lanes on this section of 115 from the county line north. So it depends on the sections. The section in Troutman here, where it's a multi-purpose path, the cost that Troutman has put in is on the order of $350,000 to extend their rail trail north from Murdoch to Old Mountain, and then they have a sidewalk project that would include paved shoulders that would go from Old Mountain over to from Main Street over to the high school. That's another $400,000 to $500,000. So we try to break it into phases, because otherwise you're talking many millions of dollars, and it's just not. It's too large a number to put your arm around. But when you break into phases like this, it's much more achievable.
So, not being a wise guy, but we don't know what it's going to cost, really.
No, sir.
Is there any time frame for construction of this thing?
Depends on the segment, sir. Some of them are already under construction. Some of them are prioritized. Some of them are going to have to wait until the project is, the road is rebuilt. Like 150, NC 73, those sections aren't going to be rebuilt for 15 or 20 years. So those sections, obviously, you don't really want to necessarily spend a lot of money retrofitting a facility like that if it's going to be torn down in the near future.
And the DOT is expecting an answer by what date?
Well, we're scheduled to take it to them next month for the first review of it. They go through 2 readings, so I'd appreciate some sort of guidance tonight. If there's something we need to look at further, we'd appreciate that guidance.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions? Mr. Smith or Ms. Hansen?
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. There's some people here I'm sure not going to like this, but I got to be honest and tell you. Here's the thing I hear from the people that I come in contact with every day, folks, and that is that the people in Washington and the people in Raleigh are irrelevant in their everyday lives. There's a disconnect between what they are concerned about and what is important to them and what the people in Washington and Raleigh seem to be concerned about. And I got to be honest with you, I share some of that concern. Sometimes, honest to goodness, I think those people are smoking crack. There's a total disconnect. I mean, we're sitting here in Iredell County with a 13% or better unemployment rate. If you look at the folks who are underemployed, working short time, their sales commissions are down or whatever, you know, the unemployment rate's probably approaching 20%. In that context, North Carolina has, I've said this till I'm blue in the face, North Carolina has the highest corporate income tax in the Southeast. It has the highest marginal income tax rate in the Southeast. It has the highest sales tax rate in the Southeast, except Tennessee, who has no income tax. It has the highest gasoline tax in the Southeast. Get in your car and cross the state line, and what do you see? Gas is cheaper and the roads are better. And a part of the problem is a mismanagement, and let me qualify this and say I don't mean any criticism of the local people in the DOT or Judge Collier. They take what money they get and they do the best they can with it. But the DOT in this state is in serious need of reform. The legislature needs to take this thing and reform it and do with it what it was designed to do. As far as economic development, I was on the phone today in a conference call with Site Selection Magazine, and they said I could go ahead and say this. For the 7th time out of the last 8 years, Statesville and Mooresville is the #1 micropolitan area in the whole country as far as a place to locate a business. But you know what? That didn't mean a whole lot, because you have a group of people in Raleigh who are not satisfied to redistribute income. They want to redistribute economic opportunity through an insane tier system that denies people who have invested in infrastructure, invested in their schools, invested in their community college from receiving the reward of that through the expansion of their tax base. It's insane. And folks, the reason I bring all that up because the reason the people feel like government is increasingly irrelevant is that is the things that Raleigh needs to be talking about. They need to be working to make the state more competitive economically. And if they do that, then you'll have the money for some of the amenities that we're talking about. But the fact of the matter is the country's broke and the state's broke. And in that context, to be quite honest, we're talking about building a bike trail. Well, that's nice. We don't have the money to do that. It doesn't exist. And maybe I'll be run out of town tomorrow morning. But my wife and daughter still love me. At least they did about 6 o'clock. That was the last time I talked to them. But somebody's got to stand up and return folks to sanity. And let's talk about the real problems that exist rather than what we would like to have. Now, Mr. Hansen, all due respect for you, the state says this is not going to cost us anything. That's what they told me about the power bill down at the schoolhouse. That's what they told us about the textbooks. That's what they talked about the maintenance of roads. And now they're talking about some bill in Raleigh where they want to shift the local maintenance to the maintenance of secondary roads to counties. I don't believe anything those people say anymore. I'm not jumping on you. You're just the messenger. I don't believe anything they say anymore. They cannot be trusted. I think this matter would be worthy of more consideration in the light of better economic times. But right now, I think we're going to look pretty foolish if we sit here and talk about for the most part, was a recreational bike trail. In a time when our fellow citizens are sitting here, 13% or better of them are unemployed. That's my heartfelt feelings about it. If that means I lose the favor of some folks, I guess I'll have to suffer through that. But these are difficult times that require people talking about substantive matters, bread and butter issues, not the way the world as we would like it to be. Let's talk about the world the way it is. So for that reason, I'm reluctant to consider this matter at the present time, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
Okay. Peter, you have,
I would just ask that the chairman proceed with the agenda.
okay.
The man needs an answer.
I'm needing a reply from you guys on this particular item.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This board proceeds by motion. There's been no motion, and I believe it's within my right to ask the board to proceed with the agenda.
Yeah, I'm still giving you and Mr. Johnson, either one, a chance to make a motion. Either for or against adoption.
In respect to Mr. Robertson, who could not be here,
Okay.
I only had a chance to speak briefly with him before he left town. Out of respect for him, he's the one who's sponsoring this resolution according to pre-established rules of procedure on this board. And
I was unaware of that.
yes, sir, he has sponsored this resolution. I'm going to make a motion. We table this till our next meeting and give Mr. Robertson an opportunity to present his case.
Okay. Any questions regarding that motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll move right along. Ms. Smith.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, under administrative matters, the first item is a request from the town of Troutman to appoint Erika Martin as a review officer for the town.
Thank you. It's one of the responsibilities of the county commissioners to appoint review officers for the county and all of the towns to sign off on subdivision plats and generally any other plat that comes through that needs to be recorded by at the Register of Deeds. Erika Martin is one of the town planners for Troutman, and they have asked that she be put on the list. And I would respectfully ask that you add Ms. Martin to the list. However, Ms. Moore has brought to my attention that there are a couple of names that need to be removed from the list as well, and those are Stephanie Whitlock and Michael Harper, who are no longer employed as either by the town for Mr. Harper or by the county and Ms. Whitlock.
Okay. Do I have a motion to appoint Erika Martin?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Mr. Ben Garrison, Transportation Director, will present a request to approve a job access grant. Mr. Garrison?
Good evening.
Good evening.
The purpose of me being here tonight is to ask that the commissioners adopt a resolution to accept a job access reverse commute grant, and also to allow me as the transportation director for Iredell County to sign all the necessary agreements and contracts with the NCDOT. This grant, the total amount of this grant is $205,500. The breakdown is as follows. It's $150,000 operating, of which 50% is federal money and 50% is local money. Our local match, we use our state rural operating assistance monies for the local match for that grant. What we basically do is we basically would invoice the DOT on a quarterly basis as we provide that service. The other part of it is $55,500 for a light transit vehicle, and the breakdown on it is 80% federal 10% state and 10% local. The period of performance for this grant is July 1st of 2009 through June 30th of 2011, so it would carry us through the next fiscal year. These are not requests for additional money. The vehicle under capital was actually in our NCDOT FY10 Community Transportation Grant, and it was moved from that grant into this Job Access Grant. And the operating money we had budgeted for a Job Access Grant, and we never got the contracts executed with the NCDOT, so this doesn't represent new money within our budget. We use rope monies and job access monies to provide for employment transportation or transportation to employment-related activities. JARC, or the Job Access, basically targets low-income workers for service. Just using our rope monies, our rural operating assistance monies, we've provided since the 1st of July about 4,500 job-related trips in Iredell County. These were basically to employment sites, and also we have been able to develop a shuttle between the Mooresville campus of Mitchell College and the Statesville campus. We're trying to increase some of the services to the community college, because what we're finding is that a lot of people, as they have lost employment, are now going back to the community college for some type of additional training. So that's the purpose of these grants, are to provide those services. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Have any questions?
Yeah, and I was just reading this authorization resolution, and I'm reading on the front page, the match is from the Rural Operating Assistance Program, which is NCDOT. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
But then you look over here on the other side where we're going to sign this resolution, and it says, whereas Iredell County will provide 50% of the cost of the above described project. And I wondered if that language was necessary, or if it could be more specific as to the, and I don't know that it even matters, Mr. Pope, but it wouldn't hurt. Just something that hit me in the head as I was looking at it.
The state actually sends us the rope monies. Now, they used to do it one time a year. Now they're doing it in incremental payments. But we actually receive that money, and it's deposited in our account, and then as we use it, we draw it down. So
I don't want to get into another talk about whether we can trust people in Raleigh, but if we're waiting on them to send us money, we might have to hold our breath, and we're kind of signing a contract here of a sort that has our name on it instead of theirs. That's just the only thing that occurred to me.
I think the suggestion is that the sentence that now reads, whereas Iredell County will provide 50% of the cost of the above project, should read 50% of the cost of the above project from the NCDOT Rural Operating Assistance Program.
That would suit me. That suit you guys?
That's how we're going to. I mean, that would be our local match for it. So that's perfectly fine.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, but historically that's what we've done. And do we have the authority to amend this resolution? Is that going to get them upset, or?
It's our resolution. They send it out as a template, so I feel comfortable with it.
That's fine.
Motion to approve as amended, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion to approve as amended. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Susan Blumenstein, Finance Director, will present a budget amendment for additional appropriation for Workers' Compensation Fund.
I've included in your package a little information about this year's activity in the Workers' Compensation Self-Insurance Fund. The county did move to self-insurance in 2005 when our annual premium was going to top $750,000 for the year. Since that time, we have accumulated fund balance in the fund, and for the last 3 years, our annual workers' comp claims and indemnity payments have averaged about $323,000. This year, I expect our claims will run a total of about $520,000, $523,400 to be exact, between workers' comp and indemnity payments. We have had more injuries this year, and we've had more scheduled medical procedures, and we expect at least one more clincher agreement. So I'd ask the board to allow us to appropriate this additional amount from that fund balance to continue through June 30th.
And that still leaves us with $1,570,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We had 3 very good years, and this one's getting us.
Luck ran out then.
Okay. Any questions? Pardon? A motion?
Motion to approve this request for budget amendment number 47, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. A motion regarding the question? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Donna Campbell, Health Director, will present a request for a budget amendment for family planning funds.
Hello. We've been notified by the state that we're to receive one-time Title X family planning funds in the amount of $25,080, and we would plan to use those for sterilizations for low-income women that do not have Medicaid. And we're asking for approval of the budget amendment for the $25,080 in family planning bonus funds.
Okay. Motion for approval?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve. Any questions regarding the motion? All in favor say aye.
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 Ms. Campbell also has a request to apply for and accept, if awarded, training funds.
Okay.
We have an opportunity to apply for and accept, because we've already been told that if we apply, we will receive the funds for quality improvement training. And this is through the North Carolina Public Health Foundation and North Carolina Center for Public Health Quality. And what the training will do is allow us to understand how to select and use quality improvement models that will be a best fit for our agency. And so I would request that you allow us to apply for and accept $13,729 in grant funding for quality improvement training for the health department.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Mashburn. I notice you have a no recommendation written here, and that's unusual.
And usually when I have that, it's presented at the last minute or something, or I haven't seen it till right then, and I haven't had an opportunity to really evaluate it and make a recommendation.
Very well. Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Motion approved. Any questions regarding the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, if you have a minute and you can wait, I'd like to catch up with you after the meeting. If not, that's fine, too.
Ronnie Thompson, County Fire Marshal, will now present an item concerning the, I think, piece of equipment that we want to get from one of our volunteer fire departments.
Correct. Central Volunteer Fire Department had a generator that quit working. They replaced it on their own, and they are coming before you tonight to request the amount of $12,000 to replace this generator to be put back into their operating budget.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Thompson?
Well, you can't get by without one of those. Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Motion to approve. Any questions regarding the motion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
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 Mr. Thompson also has a request for funds to do engineering drawings for the new South Volunteer Fire Department.
Okay.
The South Iredell Volunteer Fire Department has applied for a grant of $100,000 for these engineered drawings. If they get their grant, they've actually got a $50,000 grant. If they get that grant, they will reimburse the county the $50,000. Otherwise, they need the $100,000 out of the tax board money to proceed with their drawings for their fire department. But if they do get the grant, that money will be returned to the county.
So, Mr. Thompson, tonight they're asking for $100,000,
Correct.
and if they get this grant, they're going to repay us $50,000.
Right.
Okay.
Could cost you 50, it could cost 100, either way.
Any additional questions?
And I see we're going to take this out of the Ratings Improvement Fund, is that right?
Because of our new station.
Pardon?
They're building a new station.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any questions regarding the motion? Everybody in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Mr. Don Wall, the DSS Director, will present Budget Amendment Number 51 to recognize some additional funds for child daycare and crisis intervention.
We have received additional funds in our daycare program of $1,271,797. And we have received in our crisis intervention program an additional $276,227. And I ask that you recognize these funds.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Wall?
And 2 and 276. Recognize that you sure got my attention. Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion to approve. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Wall.
you.
Chief Deputy Rick Duddle will present a request from the Sheriff's Department to appropriate federal equity sharing funds.
Good evening. We want to transfer $24,000 out of our seized funds to one to replace a canine, and two, we have 2 existing canines that we've changed handlers, and we need to retrain those. So this time we're asking to transfer that so we can get that in the works.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Dowd?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Steve Messick, Library Director, will present a request for a budget amendment to adjust the Troutman Library budget, as well as a request for approval of a letter of commitment for public computing center grant.
Thank you. The first item is a budget amendment, and this is to transfer some funds for the Troutman Library so that we can prepare to open the library in early May. There is no overall change in expenditures. We're just moving money between accounts. The first item in your memo, but let me say that the 2 columns in the memo, the first is the current line item for that budget. The second is the requested U amount for that line item. The first is transfer 1 full-time position from the library in Statesville to the library in Troutman. When we ceased bookmobile operations last June, we reassigned 1 position that was with the bookmobile to work for the Troutman Library. We would now be, the second bookmobile position was temporarily put into Statesville Library. Now we would be moving a position from Statesville to Troutman, so there would be no overall change in the number of staff members at the library in Statesville from the period before we ceased bookmobile operations. And then the other 2 items, the FICA tax expense and the state retirement, are simply associated with transferring that employee. The insurance and bonds is to provide funds so that we can fund insurance for the contents of the building. The maintenance and repair is any incidental costs that may be associated with us actually moving in to the building. The library materials, the children's materials, and the non-adult nonfiction is simply to reallocate some of the money to have the collection more balanced. The utilities are based on what we've actually been spending. We've been paying the utility bills since December, and this is based on what our actually monthly bills have been for the electricity, water, and for the natural gas. The contracted services for janitorial, this is for janitorial service from April through June, and this is based on an estimate of based on what our other janitorial services are costing. Non-depreciable assets is increased so that we will have funds to purchase an outside book return so people can return books without getting out of their cars. And the non-depreciable assets computers would change because most of the money that we had set aside for that line item will now be funded by a grant we have received from the State Library of North Carolina. So as I said, overall, all the transfers balance out. There's no overall change or increase in the budget.
Well, Mr. Messick, it sounds like you've been pretty resourceful in the allocation of your resources, but Mr. Mashman, I got one question for you. When we get the budget this year, are we going to see a separate line item for the Troutman Library?
We do have a separate one for the library in Troutman as well as the one in Harmony.
Okay.
The appropriation, though, to the Mooresville Library is just a total amount,
Right.
not a line item budget.
Okay. Well, you've done a good job of keeping your costs down. We appreciate it. Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman. Don't mean to jump the gun on you.
Okay, motion to approve. Any questions regarding the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Thank you. The second item is a request to approve a letter of commitment for a public computing center grant. The State Library of North Carolina has included Iredell County in an application for a public computing center grant. They're doing this in cooperation with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they would be applying for federal stimulus funds under the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. The main purpose of this grant is to upgrade our internet connection and computing technology so that the library can serve as a job resource center. The state libraries identified counties in the state that have high unemployment rates and is targeting them with these grant funds. The grant would provide $47,000 in computer equipment to the library. It would also upgrade our internet connection from the current 3 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second. The grant would pay the cost of the faster internet connection for the first year. Under the grant proposal, Iredell County would then be responsible for paying the additional costs for the faster internet connection in future years. The increase over what we are paying now for our internet connection and what the increased cost would be with this faster connection would be $6,528 a year. So that's the additional amount of money we would have to spend after the second year for this higher speed connection. We would also receive training and assistance in working with unemployment resources and with local community agencies in assisting people looking for jobs, skills building, training, and so forth. So basically what we are getting out of this, we will get $47,000 in equipment. We will get a faster internet connection. They will pay for the faster internet connection the first year, and then they're asking us to make a commitment to say we would be willing to pay for the faster internet connection in future years. I've broken out the cost. The increased cost for the faster internet connection would just about balance out the cost of the additional equipment after 7 years. But we certainly could use this new equipment because of the 68 computers that we had when the library originally opened in 2005, only 33 of those computers are still working. The rest are inoperable. We have replaced some of those this year, but we still would be asking next year in our budget request for an additional 25 computers. So if we got the grant, we won't have to ask for that funding next year. Also, in our capital needs assessment that we did for the commissioners, the 3-year capital needs assessment, we had put in there some of the costs that would be involved with replacing some of the networking equipment that we acquired when we moved into the current building. We would receive some networking equipment, $6,000 worth of networking equipment under this grant, so that's something else we wouldn't have to put into our budget request. So in the short term, this will certainly help us by helping meet the need for the computers that the public needs to use. We have about 300 people using our computers every day, so we could certainly use the extra computers, and it will provide us with an additional, in addition to the 25 computers, a faster internet connection that all the computers in the library can take advantage of.
So if you had a faster internet service, you may not have to buy as many computers because people could get on and get off. Is that?
That's true. And what they're specifically asking for is for us to sign a letter of commitment, and I'll tell you what the letter says. As a local government entity that approves and provides funding, we can confirm that the library will be able to make monthly payments of approximately $900 a month to sustain the upgraded internet connection. Now, I apologize for the short time frame on this. We were first contacted about this in early February. At that time, I asked them for a draft of the letter of commitment, but I didn't receive the actual letter until Friday afternoon at 4:30. And they want the signed letter back by Thursday afternoon, so that's why I'm bringing it before the board with short notice. Now, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
That's fine. I want to make sure I understand, though. We're going to make a commitment that we'll pay the difference on this high-speed internet.
Yes.
But what's going to happen is the state library is telling us that they will include us in this application, but there's no guarantee we're going to get it. Is that right? Or
there's no guarantee that their application will be approved.
Okay.
But if that's the case, then we don't have any commitment to pay for the faster
I just want to make sure I understood that. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I just noticed it says $35,000 for 25 laptops, and I had two questions. Well, three maybe. What are we doing exactly with the computers, and why are they laptops instead of desktops? And how did $1,400 seems like a lot for a laptop?
Well, those are the figures that they provided, and I'm not sure at this point whether they would provide the specifications for the computers or they would just provide us with the funds and we could purchase the computers ourselves. I agree $1,400 is more than we're currently would be paying. If we have the freedom, we certainly would buy probably more laptops with that amount of money. As to the reason for the laptops, there are about 11 to 13 counties in the state that have been identified to receive these funds. Many of those libraries simply don't have the space to set up all these additional computers, the space in their buildings. So I think that's why they're focusing on the laptops, so there'll be more flexibility for those smaller libraries.
Just set them on the desk or something. What is a laptop cart? Is that something that stores laptops?
It's simply a large storage cart that the laptops would be put in, and it could be locked so they could be secured.
That just looks like a nice cart, too. $1,000.
Well, as I said, I'm not
but
sure.
But that's nothing to do with you. That's just their budgeting. I understand.
Any other questions?
Motion approved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve. On favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Tracy Jackson, Deputy County Manager, will now present a resolution addressing the EPA non-attainment standards.
Good evening. I think that the board probably recalls the meeting with the town of Mooresville, and the request to sign on to the resolution addressing EPA non-attainment standards. I hope that you've had a chance to look over that. I'm not sure if you have any questions or if you recollect the discussion at that time, but be glad to try to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mr. Day?
No, sir. Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Mr. Johnson for recommending this, and I want to thank the mayor of Mooresville for doing such a good job with it.
It's
Okay.
very well written, very comprehensive.
All right.
Motion approved.
Okay, motion approved. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Next item, Mr. Chairman, is a request to approve the February 16, 2010 minutes.
So moved.
All right. Any questions? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 And the last item is Mr. Lynn Niblock, Director of Inspections and Special Projects, will present a request to approve the design work began on the Providence Rail Spur.
Good evening. First of all, I apologize for working this in at the last minute, and I appreciate the board, excuse me, being willing to add this to the agenda. As you recall, the board approved the project ordinance for the improvements for Providencia USA out at the West Industrial Park several meetings ago, and this is the next step in this process, which is to award the design or the contract for the design for that rail spur to serve Providencia USA. We went out and requested qualifications or inquired about interest from 4 design firms that were listed on NCDOT Rail's pre-qualified list of designers for rail projects. 3 of those firms submitted proposals, and we reviewed those, and I would like to recognize the other members of the review committee that helped me interview those 3 firms, and that would be Mr. Tracy Jackson, Mr. Ben Zachary with Alexander Railroad, Mr. Dean Lale, and Mr. Walt McGurvey, who is a member of my staff in code enforcement. After interviewing the 3 firms and spending some time with each firm, the unanimous choice of the committee was the firm of Moffitt and Nichols out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Excuse me again. We have followed up with their references, and they are a firm that's well known for rail design, have done a good bit of work. Not only for NCDOT Rail, but Norfolk Southern and others. Long story short, I've been negotiating with them for about a week and a half now. We started off at about $130,000, and what I bring to you tonight is a not to exceed cost of $85,000 for design for that project. If the board sees fit to award Moffitt and Nichols the contract for the design, I would want to recommend that that be contingent upon review of and approval of the contract by the county attorney. And I'll be glad to answer any questions the board might have.
Questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve and award the contract for the design of the spur to Moffitt and Nichols for a sum not to exceed $85,000, subject to the review and approval of the contract by the county attorney.
Okay. Questions regarding the comments? Not all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Thank you
opposed?
very much.
Mr. Niblock, before
Yes,
you
sir.
leave there, Mr. Mashburn, would it be permissible, I don't want to get out of sorts here, but allow Mr. Niblock to tell us if we're making any progress on the lighting bids? Where do we, and the reason I ask, I'm going to be upfront about it, I want to make sure that's a top priority with yourself and Mr. Lael.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to give you an update and give the board an update on that. I did not get an opportunity to look at today's paper, but there should have been an advertisement in today's paper. I do know that Mr. Lael has emailed all the previous bidders with the information, and we have a pre-bid conference scheduled for next Monday. And so we are moving forward as quickly as possible with that process, and hope to be able to bring it back to the board the first meeting in April.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's all the administrative matters, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. An announcement of vacancies occurring on boards and commissions. Recreation Advisory Board, one announcement. Animal Grievance Committee, one announcement. Nursing Home Advisory Board, one announcement. Appointments to boards and commissions, we have none unless someone has someone on the reminder list. Unfinished business. New business. Okay. County Manager's report.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a report, but I do have a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. First thing is a budget calendar, and I would like to present this to you with recommendation that you consider approving this budget calendar at your next meeting. And you will notice that on this there is a change in the schedule for the meeting for the month of July. That's been traditional in the past, that after all the meetings that we have in May and June, that you only hold one meeting in July. And this recommends that that meeting be held on July the 13th. However, of course, you know, it's your discretion as to what date that you would hold that, or whether you would even just hold one meeting in July. But the sooner we know that, the better it is for us for our planning purposes and scheduling appointments before the board. In addition to that, and again, I'd like to put that on the agenda for the next meeting. In addition to that, traditionally also, when an election is held on a county commissioner meeting day, there have been times that you have rescheduled that meeting or not held that meeting. May the 4th will be the first primary election, and we also would like to know by the next meeting, if possible, if you want to alter that date. Again, that would give us an opportunity to schedule appointments before the board or other business matters before the board if we know that you're going to change that date.
It's certainly the day that I have a lot of business on, and I guess actually you guys do too. So,
what do you think, Steve?
Yeah, that's generally been what we've done. We can reschedule it on the 11th if that's agreeable to everybody.
Did you say
the 11th?
The 11th?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As far as July is concerned, Mr. Mashburn, that's, to my knowledge, that's worked pretty well, one meeting in July.
Usually does.
Most people are on vacation, and we're not on the forefront of their mind. They're usually doing something else, so that's agreeable to me if it's okay with the rest of the board.
Sounds good to me, too.
Do you have a recommended date on that?
I don't know yet. I can get staff to have one for you this week.
Okay. Then we'll present it to them. Thank you. So,
we're saying now, that meeting you have scheduled for 13th of July for the board, and then also the 11th of May. Am I right, Mr. Johnson?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Q?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other, you have anything else, Mr. Masters?
No, sir, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, now, we're down to closed session. Make a motion that we go in a closed session under GS 143-318, 111, Section A, 4, and then GS 143-318, 11, Section A, 3. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, as a result of our closed session, I would like to offer a motion that we authorize our chairman to execute a joint economic incentive agreement with Providentia with a threshold of $30 million. The incentive to be allocated was $63,000 assigned to the jobs commitment and $186,900 allocated to the tax-based commitment. Tax-based commitment to be reduced pro rata in the event that the tax base fails to reach $70 million and the jobs commitment reduced pro rata for jobs not produced at the threshold level.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions regarding the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any other business?
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.